Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to bring you a battle between two Throne of Eldraine sealed decks. We have the red-black deck over here and the blue-red deck over there. We'll go ahead and get started by rolling 2 dice to see who goes first. Red-black gets 7. Blue-red rolls 9. Blue-red will opt to go first. We'll draw 7 cards each. Blue-red draws a mountain, a weapon rack, a jousting dummy, an island, Sir Eleonora the Discerning, Charmed Sleep, and Island. This is a bit of a slower hand, but because we have a 2, 3 to 4, even though weapon rack is not ideal, we will keep it. Red-black draws an Inspiring Veteran, a swamp, a witch's cottage, a mountain, bake into a pie, a mountain, and a jousting dummy. This is not an ideal start because there are a lot of lands and the deck can't really do much except for play the jousting dummy and then eventually remove something. So we're going to take a mulligan and go down to 6. Now we draw a Castle Embereth, a mountain, a swamp, Barrow Witches, Scorching Dragonfire, Rimrock Knight, and Inspiring Veteran. This is still not great, especially because the Inspiring Veteran can't really be played here. But I think we can keep this off the Rimrock Knight into the Scorching Dragonfire, or vice versa, and we will take the Inspiring Veteran and stick it on the bottom of the deck. Izzet will play the island, and we'll pass the turn. Rakdos draws a Jousting Dummy, and we will play the mountain, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet draws, gets a Corridor Monitor. Izzet will play the mountain, and then we'll tap the island and the mountain and play the Jousting Dummy. This is a 2/1 Artifact Scarecrow Knight, and for 3, Jousting Dummy gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a Malevolent Noble. Rakdos will play the swamp. We'll tap both of these and we'll play the Malevolent Noble. This is a 2/2 human noble with 2, sacrifice an artifact or another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Malevolent Noble, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets an island, will play the island, and then Izzet will attack with the Jousting Dummy. Rakdos will decline a block and take 2 to go to 18. Izzet will follow up by tapping an island and a mountain and casting Corridor Monitor. This is a 1/4 artifact construct. When it enters the battlefield, untap target artifact or creature you control. Will untap the Jousting Dummy, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws, gets a Witch's Cottage. Rakdos will play the Castle Embereth. This is a land, and it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain. We do. You can tap to add red or pay 1 red and tap it. Creatures you control gain +1/+0 until end of turn. Play this, and then seeing that we have both the Rimrock Knight and the Scorching Dragonfire available to us as responses, we're going to attack with the Malevolent Noble for 2. Izzet not seeing a potential blowout here, but not wanting to risk a 2-for-1, will block with just the Corridor Monitor. In response, Rakdos will tap the Castle Embereth for red, and then will cast the adventure half of Rimrock Knight. It's Boulder Rush. It's an instant, and target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and then it exiles. This will make this a 4/2, and that will defeat the Corridor Monitor. Corridor Monitor dies. And on the second main phase, Rakdos will tap the swamp and the mountain, and then cast the Rimrock Knight from exile. And this is a 3/1 Dwarf Knight, and it can't block. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets a mountain, we'll play the mountain, and then we will tap 4 mana and play the weapon rack. This is an artifact, and it enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. You can tap it to move a counter from weapon rack onto target creature. Activate this ability only anytime you can cast a sorcery. We'll put our 3 counters on it. We'll tap it to remove a counter from it, and then put a +1/+1 counter on the Jousting Dummy. making it a 3/2. And then we are not going to block the Malevolent Noble on trade, so we're going to attack with the Jousting Dummy for 3. Rakdos cannot block, will take 3 and go to 15. And Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws a Weaselback red cap. Rakdos will attack with the Rimrock Knight and the Malevolent Noble for 5. Izzet cannot block and will lose 5 life to go to 15. Rakdos will play the Witch's Cottage. It is a swamp, and it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more swamps. When it enters the battlefield untapped, you may put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, but it's not entering untapped, so we'll enter it tapped. We'll spend 2 mana to play a Jousting Dummy, and then 1 more mana to play the Weaselback red cap. This is a 1/1 Goblin Knight, and for 1 and a red, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Weaselback red cap. Izzet will play the island, and then we'll tap out and play Sir Eleanor the Discerning. This is a star 4 legendary human knight, and its power is equal to the number of cards in your hand. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and spells your opponent's cast that target Sir Eleanor cost 2 more to cast. It enters the battlefield, we'll draw a card. This is a Raging red cap. This means Sir Eleanor's power is 3, and then we will immediately tap the weapon rack to put a +1/+1 counter onto Sir Eleanor, making Sir Eleanor a 4/5. Don't feel like trading the Jousting Dummy just yet, so we will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws a Festive Funeral. Then we will attack with the Weaselback red cap. Izzet sees that the red cap could trade with Sir Eleanor, and so we will opt not to trade here, and we will not block. In response, Rakdos will pay a red and a black and use its ability once to make it a 3/1 until end of turn. Izzet will take 3 and go to 12. Then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a Castle Embreth. Sir Eleanor is now a 6/5. We'll play the Castle Embreth, reducing Sir Eleanor's power. We will tap 3 mana to cast Charmed Sleep, targeting the Malevolent Noble. This is an aura, and it says enchant creature. When Charmed Sleep enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature does not untap during its controller's untap step. The Noble taps. We're going to play defense for now, and we will tap 3 mana here and play the Raging red cap. This is a 1/2 Goblin Knight with double strike. And then we will tap the weapon rack to transfer the counter from here to the Raging red cap. In response to that trigger, Rakdos will tap the mountain and the swamp and cast Scorching Dragonfire. This is an instant. It says Scorching Dragonfire deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker died this turn, exile it instead, targeting the Raging red cap. The red cap takes 3 and is exiled. The weapon rack trigger resolves, and the +1/+1 counter vanishes into thin air. And then Izzet has nothing else to do, so it will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws. We will again attack with the Weaselback red cap. Again, not wanting to trade Sir Eleanor for the 1/1, we will decline to block. Rakdos will tap a black and a red and pump the Weaselback red cap to a 3/1. Izzet takes 3 and goes to 9. Rakdos will follow up by tapping out and playing another Malevolent Noble, and Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a mountain. We will hold the mountain. We will tap 1 mana and play the Weaselback red cap. And we are going to remain on the defense here and pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws a Weaselback red cap. Think trading the red cap for the red cap is okay in this case, since we're going to have another one. So we will attack again with the Weaselback red cap. Izzet will block the red cap with the red cap. Rakdos accepts the trade, so the red caps will both die. And then Rakdos will spend 1 mana and cast another Weaselback red cap, and Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets an Animating Fairy. We will spend 3 mana and cast the Bring to Life part of Animating Fairy. This is a sorcery And it says target non-creature artifact you control becomes 0/0 artifact creature, put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. The weapon rack is now a 4/4. And then we will tap out and cast Animating Fairy from exile. This is a 2/2 fairy with flying. And then I think a 2-for-1 is fine in this case, so we will be attacking with the weapon rack. Rakdos can take a hit or two, so we will take the hit and go down to 11. Izzet will move to the end step. On the end step, Rakdos will spend 2 mana and use the Malevolent Noble's ability to sacrifice the Malevolent Noble here. This will put a +1/+1 counter on it and return the Charmed Sleep to Izzet. Izzet gets the Charmed Sleep in its graveyard, and Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws, gets a swamp, will play the swamp, and then Rakdos will again attack with the Weaselback Redcap. Izzet is tired of taking hits, so we will trade with the Jousting Dummy. Rakdos accepts the terms, and we will spend a red and a black mana to pump the Weaselback Redcap for the trade. Weaselback Redcap dies. Jousting Dummy dies. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets a Scorching Dragonfire, and Izzet will attack with the Weapon Rack and the Animating Fairy. There is not a great block here, but taking 6 is pretty dangerous, especially since they can pump 2 more to go to 8 damage. So I think we're going to have to throw in the Malevolent Noble and the Jousting Dummy up against the Weapon Rack, potentially sacrificing the Rimrock Knight to put the counter on the Noble. The counter shenanigans make it really hard to do anything about this particular combat, so Izzet declines to use Scorching Dragonfire and instead will tap the Castle Embreth and use its ability, tapping 2 more reds and a blue to give both of the creatures +1/+0, meaning the Animating Fairy will hit for 3, and then the Weapon Rack will trade with the Jousting Dummy and the Malevolent Noble. Weapon Rack dies. The Malevolent Noble and the Jousting Dummy both die. And Rakdos takes 3 to go to 8. Then Izzet passes the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws, gets a mountain. Rakdos cannot target Sir Eleanor because of claws on Sir Eleanor's creatures card, so we're going to play Mountain to be able to do that in the future. And then we will spend 5 mana and cast Barrow Witches. This is a 3/4 human warlock, and when it enters the battlefield, return target knight card from your graveyard to your hand. We will take the Weaselback Redcap and put that back in our hand. We'll spend 1 more mana and recast the Weaselback Redcap. And then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws an Unexplained Vision. Izzet will spend 5 mana, tapping 3 islands to cast Unexplained Vision. This is a sorcery. It says draw 3 cards, and it has Adamant. If at least 3 blue mana were spent to cast the spell, scry 3, so we will scry 3 after we draw 3 cards. We draw a Lock Dragon, an island, and a Dwarven Mine. We will then scry 3. The next 3 cards are Mountain, Corridor Monitor, and Charmed Sleep. We'll keep the Charmed Sleep, but we'll put the Corridor Monitor and the Mountain on the bottom of the library. Then Izzet will play a Mountain, and Izzet will attack with the Animating Fairy for 2 in the sky. Rakdos cannot block and will go down to 6, and Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws a Lost Legion. We don't have the mana to hit Sir Eleanor, whose power is 5, but we will attack with the Weaselback Redcap, as we were doing before, with 3 pumps available for a total of 7 potential damage. Izzet, seeing that they have a Scorching Dragonfire in hand, declines to block. Rakdos will pump once with a Swamp and a Mountain to make it a 3/1, and will decline to pump any further, wanting to cast the Lost Legion. Being in a precarious position, Izzet will spend 2 mana and cast Scorching Dragonfire, targeting the Weaselback Redcap. The Weaselback Redcap is exiled. And then Rakdos will spend 3 mana and cast Lost Legion. This is a 2/3 Spirit Knight. When it enters the battlefield, we'll scry 2. We look at the next 2 cards, is our Plane and a Barge In. We will keep the Barge In as a way of getting damage through and We actually kind of want to keep the plains as well, so we'll keep them both for the next turn, and then we will pass the turn to Izzet. Izzet untaps, draws a Charmed Sleep. Izzet will play the Dwarven Mine. This is a mountain, and it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 3 or more other mountains. We do. And when it enters the battlefield untapped, we create a 1/1 red dwarf creature token. So we'll get our dwarf now. I think we might be able to do some massive damage here by pressing the advantage. So we will tap 3 blue mana and cast Charmed Sleep, targeting the Barrow Witches. The Barrow Witches tap. And then Izzet will attack with the Animating Fairy and Sir Eleonora as a 3/5. The pump from the castle Embreth means that they could do lethal if not blocked, and only Lost Legion can block. So Rakdos will block the Sir Eleonora with the Lost Legion. We'll go ahead and take that with no other effects. Rakdos will take 2 to go to 4, and we'll throw away the Lost Legion here into the graveyard. On the second main phase, Izzet will tap 4 mountains and play the Lock Dragon. This is a 3/2 dragon with flying. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may discard a card. If you do draw a card, it enters the battlefield. We'll go ahead and discard the island and draw a card. We drew a Crystal Slipper, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws a Barge in. This was the wrong order here. We don't quite have the capacity to take out my opponent, and I don't think that we can win now. So we will attack with the Rimrock Knight. Not wanting to risk a sudden loss, Izzet will block with the Dwarf token. Seeing little other option, Rakdos will tap the mountain and cast Barge in. This is an instant. It says target attack creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Each attacking non-human creature gains trample until end of turn, making the Rimrock Knight a 5/3 trampler. This will kill the dwarf and will cause Izzet to take 4 damage to go down to 5. Then Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws a mountain, and seeing a clear board here, we will attack with the entire team. Rakdos will tap out and cast Festive Funeral. It is an instant. Target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. That is 7, and that will target the Lock Dragon because we don't have the mana to target Sir Eleonora. The Lock Dragon's trigger actually goes off, so we'll discard the mountain and draw an island, which doesn't matter. The Lock Dragon will die. However, Rakdos is unable to block the incoming 5 damage, and Rakdos will die. That ends the first game. We are going to go into sideboards, and we will be back for game 2. In sideboarding, Izzet will choose to remove the corridor monitor and replace it with the Runaway Together to fizzle some of their removal. Having lost the first round, Rakdos will opt to go first the second time. Rakdos draws a Castle Embreth, Mountain, Castle Embreth, Swamp, claim the Firstborn, Festive Funeral, and Swamp. This is a terrible hand to be aggressive with, so we are going to mulligan this and go to 6. Rakdos draws a Searing Barrage, Swamp, Swamp, Wrinkle, Master of Prank, Swamp, Swamp, and Mountain. This is also a really, really bad hand. However, I don't think we can go to 5 being as aggressive as we are, and Wrinkle is quite good, so we're going to keep this, taking a Swamp and putting it at the bottom of the deck. Izzet draws Sir Eleonora, Island, Runaway Together, Islands, Crystal Slipper, Mountain, and Folio of Fancies. This is a bit of a slow hand, and it's not great to keep against an aggressive deck, but because we have things that we can cast, we're going to keep it anyways. Rakdos will play a Mountain, and we'll pass the turn. Izzet draws a Charmed Sleep, will play an Island, and then Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos draws an Inspiring Veteran, will play a Swamp, and Rakdos will pass the turn. Izzet draws an Island, will play a Mountain. We'll tap the Island and the Mountain, and we'll play Folio of Fancies. This is an artifact, and it says players have no maximum hand size. You can play XX and tap it for each player to draw X cards, and pay 2 blue and tap it for each opponent to put a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand from the top of their library into their graveyard. Then Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos draws a Festive Funeral, will play a Swamp, and then we'll pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets a Charmed Sleep, will play an Island, and since my opponent isn't doing much of anything, we'll pass the turn. Rakdos draws, gets a barge in, we'll play the Swamp, and then we'll tap out and we'll play Rankle, Master of Pranks. This is a 3/3 legendary fairy rogue with fly and haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, choose any number. Each player discards a card, each player loses 1 life and draws a card, and each player sacrifices a creature. It has haste, and we'll go to combat and attack. It can't block, so we'll take 3 and go to 17. Rakdos will choose each player to discard a card. So with that trigger on the stack, it will tap out and tap the Folio of Fancies to force Rakdos to mill 4 cards. Rakdos mills a Epic Downfall, a Castle Embereth, a Swamp, and a Barge in. It will discard a Crystal Slipper. Rakdos will discard the Inspiring Veteran, and then Rakdos will pass the turn. It untaps, draws an island, will play the island. It will spend 3 mana and cast Charm Sleep, targeting Rankle. Rankle has been charmed, and then it will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws a Castle Embereth, will play the Castle Embereth, but we can't really do much of anything because it is not playing any creatures, and Rakdos has no creatures, and so Rakdos will pass the turn. It untaps, draws a Scorching Dragonfire. It will play the island, and then it will tap out and play Sir Eleonora the Discerning. We will draw a card. Sir Eleonora is a 4/4 at the moment, and then it will pass the turn. Rakdos draws, has a Weaselback Redcap. Rakdos cannot target Sir Eleonora because of the ward ability on it, and so Rakdos will spend 1 mana and cast the Weaselback Redcap, and without much else to do right now, Rakdos will pass the turn. It untaps, draws an Animating Fairy. It will play the Mountain. Then it will spend 3 mana to cast Bring to Life, targeting the Folio of Fancies, making it a 4/4. And then it will attack with a 4/4 and the 3/4. Rakdos doesn't have any responses and will take 7 to go to 13. It will hold up their mana to protect their creatures and will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws, gets a Raging Redcap. Getting rid of the Folio seems like a great idea right now. We have 5 cards in the graveyard, so we will spend 5 mana and cast Searing Barrage, targeting the Folio of Fancies. It's an instant. It deals 5 damage to target creature, and if at least 3 red mana were spent to cast the spell, it deals 3 damage to that creature's controller. 3 mana was not spent to cast the spell. We'll target the Folio of Fancies. In response, it will tap 2 islands and cast Runaway Together. It's an instant. It says choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players. Return those creatures to their owner's hands. We'll choose the Folio of Fancies and the Weaselback Redcap. The Folio returns to its hand. The Redcap returns to Rakdos' hand. And Rakdos, without any mana and ability to cast anything, will pass the turn. It untaps. It draws a Mountain. It sees a capacity to hit for 4, and so it will attack for 4. Rakdos can't block, so we'll take 4 and go to 9. It will follow up by spending 2 mana to cast the Folio of Fancies, and then we will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps. Rakdos draws, gets a Weaselback Redcap. Blue holding their mana up is a little suspicious, but I don't think we can hold back this tide anymore. Rakdos will spend 3 mana and cast the Raging Redcap. While that triggers on the stack, it will tap 3 mana and use the Folio of Fancies ability to cause Rakdos to mill 4. Rakdos will mill 4, will mill a Mountain, a Stormfist Crusader, a Signpost Scarecrow, and a Malevolent Noble. And then Rakdos will tap another mana and cast the Weaselback Redcap, and Rakdos will pass the turn. It untaps, draws a Searing Barrage. It will play the Mountain. It will tap 5 mana, 3 of which include the mountains. to cast Searing Barrage, targeting the Raging Red Cap. Rakdos loses the Raging Red Cap and then takes an additional 3 damage, going down to 6. Izzet will tap 2 and then tap the Folio of Fancies for each player to draw 1 card. Izzet draws a Tome Raider. Rakdos draws a Mountain. Then Izzet will attack with Sir Eleonora at 3 power. Rakdos will probably lose if they chump like this, so they will take 3 and go to 3. Then Izzet will pass the turn. Rakdos untaps, draws a Plains, will play the Mountain to power up our Weaselback Red Cap. We'll spend 1 mana to play a second Weaselback Red Cap, and we'll stay on the defense here and pass the turn. Izzet untaps, draws, gets a Mountain. Izzet will spend 3 mana and cast Charmed Sleep, targeting one of the Weaselback Red Caps. The Red Cap taps, and then Izzet will spend 2 more mana and cast Scorching Dragonfire, targeting the other Red Cap. The Red Cap exiles, and it looks like the win is in hand. We will tap the Island and the Mountain to tap the Folio of Fancies and have each player draw a card. Izzet will draw a Corridor Monitor. Rakdos will draw a Tempting Witch. Izzet then will attack with the 3/4 Sir Eleonora. Rakdos has no blockers, will lose their 3 life, and losing in back-to-back games to lose the match at 0 and 2. And that was the battle between the 2 Throne of Eldraine sealed decks. I think Rakdos stumbled on their opening hands in each game, and so that kind of lost it for them, but having a Sir Eleonora that was really hard to interact with also made it very difficult for Rakdos to pull it together. I think that the decks were not unevenly matched against Izzet. It just was a series of bad draws. Let me know what your thoughts were about the games in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.